It was a cold winter morning in downtown Atlanta. The streets were busy with people rushing to work, cars honking and vendors shouting about their fresh coffee and warm bagels. Among all the noise, a black luxury car slowly stopped near the corner of the street. Inside sat a man in his late 50s, dressed in an expensive suit and wearing a serious expression. His name was Richard Lawson, a billionaire businessman known for his intelligence, success, and cold attitude toward life. Money could buy him anything he wanted, yet he always felt something missing. Richard was on his way to a meeting when he noticed a small crowd gathered near a cafe. Curious, he looked through the tinted window and saw a young boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old, dancing barefoot on the pavement. His clothes were old and torn, his shoes full of holes, but his energy was something different. Every step he took had rhythm, every move carried joy. His body moved with grace, and his smile never faded even though the cold wind brushed against his face. For a few seconds, Richard couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He was used to seeing talented people perform on big stages or on TV, but there was something about this boy that felt different. The boy wasn't dancing for fame, money, or attention. He was dancing like it was the only thing keeping him alive. A woman from the crowd dropped a few dollars into a small tin can placed beside him. The boy paused, smiled, and thanked her politely before continuing his dance. His joy seemed so pure that even the busiest people slowed down to watch him. Some smiled, others recorded him on their phones. But to Richard, this scene touched a deep corner of his heart, a corner that had been silent for a long time. Richard's daughter, Emily, had been in a wheelchair for almost 2 years. She was once a bright, cheerful girl who loved music and dancing, but a tragic car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. Since that day, the laughter in Richard's mansion had faded. Emily stopped smiling, and Richard buried himself in work to hide his pain. He felt powerless watching his daughter lose her spirit day by day. Maybe that's why the sight of this young boy dancing with so much life hit him so hard. For the first time in months, Richard felt something, a mixture of sadness, admiration, and curiosity. He wanted to know who this boy was and why he was dancing in the freezing cold with no proper shoes on his feet. Richard asked his driver to stop the car. The driver hesitated. "Sir, we're already late for the meeting," he said gently. But Richard shook his head. "Just wait here," he replied and stepped out of the car. As soon as he stepped onto the sidewalk, people began to notice him. It wasn't every day that a man wearing a $1,000 suit walked among street performers. But Richard didn't care. His eyes were fixed on the boy. When the boy finished his dance, the small crowd clapped and cheered. The boy bowed shyly and collected the few coins and small bills people had thrown into his tin can. His face glowed with satisfaction, not because of the money, but because he had made people smile. Richard slowly walked up to him. The boy looked up, surprised to see such a well-dressed man standing before him. "You dance very well," Richard said, his voice calm but full of warmth. The boy smiled, showing his small, uneven teeth. "Thank you, sir," he replied politely. "What's your name?" Richard asked. "Jaden," the boy said proudly. "And why are you dancing here in this cold?" Richard asked, curious. Jaden looked down for a moment, then said softly, "I just like to make people happy. When they smile, I feel happy too." Richard wasn't expecting that answer. It wasn't the kind of response you hear from most people. He had expected the boy to talk about money, survival, or dreams of fame. But Jaden's reason was simple and pure. Just then, a bus passed by, splashing dirty water onto the pavement. Jaden jumped aside, laughing, and continued tapping his foot like he didn't care about anything. Richard was amazed by how free the boy seemed. No worries, no anger, just joy. It was the kind of joy Richard hadn't seen in his daughter's eyes for a very long time. Something inside him stirred. Maybe it was guilt, maybe longing. He remembered how Emily used to spin around the living room laughing, asking him to clap for her dances. Those were beautiful days before everything changed. Watching Jaden reminded him of his daughter's lost spirit. He stood there quietly, watching Jaden dance again as more people stopped to look. The world around them seemed a blur, just a rich man and a poor boy connected by something deeper than money or status. When Jaden finished, Richard dropped a $100 bill into the tin can. The boy's eyes widened. "Sir, that's too much," he said quickly. But Richard smiled and shook his head. "No, you earned it. Keep dancing." Jaden's eyes sparkled. "Thank you, sir. God bless you." As Richard walked back to his car, something inside him changed. He didn't know why, but he felt lighter. Maybe it was Jaden's energy, or maybe it was the way he danced like the world was still beautiful. While the car drove away, Richard kept looking through the window, watching the boy disappear into the crowd. A small figure full of hope and joy. He didn't know then that this simple encounter would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Richard couldn't stop thinking about the boy he had met on the street. The image of Jaden's bright smile and the rhythm of his dance stayed in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. It was strange. A billionaire like him, who met hundreds of people every week, couldn't shake off the memory of one poor boy dancing barefoot on the cold pavement. At breakfast, his house felt as silent as ever. The long dining table, the expensive chandelier, and the golden plates all looked beautiful but lifeless. His daughter, Emily, sat quietly in her wheelchair near the window staring outside at the garden. Her once sparkling eyes now looked dull, as if the world outside didn't matter anymore. "Good morning, sweetheart," Richard said softly, taking a seat beside her. Emily smiled faintly. "Morning, Dad." He noticed she didn't eat much, just poked her food with a fork. He tried to make conversation, but she seemed far away, lost in her thoughts. It broke his heart to see her like that. A bright young girl trapped not only in a wheelchair but also inside her sadness. As he left for work, his mind drifted again to Jaden, that boy who had nothing, yet seemed to carry the joy of the whole world in his steps. Why did he remind me of Emily so much? He wondered. Later that day, during a meeting with his top executives, Richard found himself zoning out. The people around him discussed profits, stock prices, and new contracts, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Back on that busy street, watching the boy dance. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He excused himself from the meeting and left early. His assistant was confused, but Richard didn't care. Something deep inside was pulling him back to that place, a feeling he couldn't explain. He told his driver, "Take me to that cafe on Pine Street, the one near the park." When he arrived, the afternoon sun was shining softly over the city. The street looked almost the same, crowded and noisy but full of life. Richard's eyes scanned every corner, searching for that one familiar face. And then he saw him, Jaden, dancing again, this time to a small speaker playing an old R&B track. His movements were light, full of rhythm and happiness. His shoes were still torn and his jacket looked thin against the cold, but none of that seemed to bother him. Richard stood there quietly, watching from a distance. He noticed how the boy smiled at everyone who passed by, not because he wanted money, but because he truly loved dancing. Every twist and step came straight from his heart. When the music ended, Jaden bowed to his small audience and collected a few coins from his tin can. That's when Richard walked toward him again. Jaden recognized him immediately. "Hey, it's you again," he said with excitement. "You came back." Richard smiled. "Yes, I did. You dance really well, Jaden. Do you practice anywhere?" Jaden shook his head. "No, sir. I just dance here on the street. The ground is my stage." "That's impressive," Richard said. "You must really love dancing." Jaden nodded proudly. "Yes, sir. It makes people happy. When they smile, I feel like I did something good." His words touched Richard deeply. Most adults he knew worked only for themselves, for success, for fame, or for money. But this young boy who barely had anything was dancing simply to bring joy to others. "Do your parents know you dance here?" Richard asked gently. Jaden's smile faded a little. "My mom knows," he said quietly. "She's sick, so I try to help her by collecting a little money. My dad, he left when I was small." Richard felt a sting in his chest. There was something brave about the way Jaden spoke. No self-pity, no bitterness, just honesty. Before Richard could ask more, Jaden looked up toward the tall hospital building across the street. His eyes softened as he said, "Sometimes I also dance for someone special over there." Richard turned to look where the boy was pointing. Through one of the hospital windows, a small figure sat watching, a young girl in a wheelchair. Her hands rested on the window frame as she looked down with a gentle smile. "That girl, do you know her?" Richard asked. Jaden nodded. "No, sir, not really. But I see her almost every day when I dance here. She watches me and smiles. I think maybe she's sad, so I dance to make her happy." Richard's heart skipped a beat. For a few seconds, everything around him went silent. The cars, the crowd, the noise, all faded away. His eyes widened as he looked closer at the girl in the window. Even from that distance, he recognized her face instantly. It was Emily, his daughter. He stood frozen, unable to speak. The realization hit him so hard that it left him breathless. His daughter, who hadn't smiled properly in years, was watching this poor boy dance every day from her hospital window. And she was smiling. Truly smiling. Jaden turned back to him, unaware of what was going through Richard's mind. "I don't know her name," he said softly. "But when she smiles, I feel like I did something good today." Richard swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions under control. "You have no idea how much good you've done, Jaden," he said quietly, his voice trembling. In that single moment, everything made sense. Why he had felt drawn to the boy. Why he couldn't forget him. Their lives were already connected in a way he never imagined. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Richard stood there, watching Jaden dance again, now knowing that this boy, a stranger from the streets, had brought light back into his daughter's world. He didn't say anything more. He just watched in silence, with tears slowly forming in his eyes. What had started as a moment of curiosity had just become the beginning of something that would change all of their lives forever. Richard couldn't sleep that night. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. The way Jaden danced, the way Emily smiled from the hospital window, the way life had unexpectedly tied them together. It felt like fate had written a story he never saw coming. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, Richard made a decision. He wanted to know more about Jaden, who he was, where he came from, and why someone with so little could carry so much light in his heart. So, after visiting Emily at the hospital, he walked down to the same street corner near the cafe. The air was crisp and the city was just waking up. The shopkeepers were opening their doors and the smell of fresh bread drifted through the air. And there he was again, Jaden, with his little tin can, his old speaker, and that unstoppable energy. "Good morning, Jaden," Richard said with a smile. The boy turned around, surprised. "Oh, hi, sir. You came back again?" "Yes," Richard said. "I wanted to talk to you a bit if that's okay." Jaden nodded eagerly. "Of course, sir. But I don't start dancing until the music shop opens." "My speaker battery died," he added with a shy grin. Richard laughed softly. "That's all right. Maybe it's a good time to talk then." They sat down on a nearby bench and for the first time Richard got a closer look at the boy. His clothes were old but clean. His eyes, dark and bright, had that spark of hope you rarely see in adults. His hands looked rough, perhaps from helping his mother or carrying things. "So, Jaden," Richard began gently, "you said your mom is sick. How is she now?" Jaden looked down, his cheerful expression softening. "She's not too well, sir. She has trouble breathing most days. The doctor said she needs better medicine, but it's expensive." Richard's heart tightened. "Do you go to school?" he asked. "Not right now," Jaden replied. "I used to. But after Mom got worse, I stopped going so I could take care of her. I help her with cooking, cleaning, and sometimes I dance here to earn a little money. The people around are kind. They give me coins, food, sometimes even warm clothes." He paused, smiling faintly. "But honestly, I don't dance just for the money, sir. I dance because it makes me forget all the bad things for a while. It's like, when the music starts, I'm in another world." Richard listened silently, moved by every word. The boy's voice carried both innocence and maturity, the kind that only hardship could teach. "Does your mom know you dance here?" Richard asked. Jaden nodded. "Yes, sir. She doesn't like it when it's too cold, but she says my dancing keeps her spirits up. Sometimes when she's feeling strong, she watches me from our apartment window, but lately she's too weak to come." Richard could feel a lump forming in his throat. "You're a good son, Jaden," he said quietly. Jaden looked embarrassed and shook his head. "I just do what I can. Mom always says God gives everyone a gift. Maybe dancing is mine, and maybe I can use it to help people, even if it's just making someone smile for a moment." Those words hit Richard harder than he expected. In his world of business and power, he'd heard countless speeches about success, motivation, and leadership, but none of them sounded as honest as this boy's simple belief. He looked toward the hospital again, where Emily was probably in her therapy session. "And that girl you mentioned yesterday," Richard said slowly, "the one you dance for sometimes. You don't know her name? Jaden shook his head. No, sir. I just see her in that window. She looks sad sometimes. I think maybe she can't walk, so I dance to make her smile. When she smiles, I feel like the whole world becomes brighter. Richard swallowed hard. His eyes glistened as he turned away for a moment, not wanting the boy to see his tears. He couldn't believe that this child, a stranger, had been doing something so kind for his daughter without even knowing it. After a pause, Richard asked softly, Jaden, what do you want to be when you grow up? Jaden's face lit up immediately. I want to be a dancer, like the ones on TV, but different. I want to teach kids who can't afford dance classes. I want everyone to feel that same joy I feel when I move to music. Richard smiled. That's a beautiful dream, Jaden. Don't ever let go of it. The boy nodded confidently. I won't, sir. Mom says dreams are free, but working for them is what makes them real. That line, so simple, yet so powerful, stayed with Richard long after their conversation ended. Before leaving, Richard reached into his pocket and handed Jaden a card. If you ever need help, anything, call this number. It's my office. Tell them your name and they'll reach me. Jaden looked at the card as if it were made of gold. Thank you, sir. I'll take care of it. I promise I won't bother you unless it's important. Richard smiled. You could never bother me, Jaden. As he walked back toward his car, he turned once more to see Jaden setting up his small speaker again, ready to dance. The boy looked so full of hope, so alive, and Richard couldn't help but wonder how such a small soul could carry so much light in such a dark world. That night, as he sat beside Emily's bed watching her rest, Richard held her hand and whispered softly, You know, sweetheart, I met someone today who reminded me that happiness doesn't always come from what we have, but from what we give. Emily didn't respond, but a small smile appeared on her lips, almost as if she already knew who he was talking about. And from that moment, Richard knew that Jaden's story, the boy's courage, his kindness, his dreams, had just begun to change not only his daughter's life but his own as well. The following morning was brighter than usual. The winter sun cast a soft golden light through the large windows of the hospital, warming the cold white walls. Emily sat near her window, her blanket wrapped tightly around her legs, gazing at the busy street below. For the first time in a long while, her eyes sparkled with quiet excitement. She was waiting for the boy who danced. Down on the street, Jaden was already there, setting up his little speaker and smiling as people passed. The music started, and he began to move with his usual energy, twisting, jumping, spinning, like his body carried the rhythm of joy itself. From her window, Emily clapped softly, a small but real smile spreading across her face. Her nurse noticed and said, It's nice to see you smile again, Emily. She nodded. He's amazing. I don't know his name, but when he dances, it makes me forget I'm stuck here. What she didn't know was that her father, Richard, was standing silently at the end of the hallway watching her. He had just arrived at the hospital for his usual visit, but this time he didn't walk in right away. Instead, he stood there, his heart heavy and full at the same time, seeing his daughter's smile return, something he hadn't seen in months. He followed her gaze out the window and saw Jaden again. The same boy who had told him just a day earlier that he danced for a girl in the hospital who always smiled from the window. That girl, his daughter. For a few seconds, Richard felt as if the whole world had stopped moving. It was as though the universe had written this connection quietly, secretly, right under his nose. His throat tightened and his eyes blurred with tears. He walked into Emily's room softly. "You're up early," he said with a warm smile. Emily turned, surprised. "Dad, you're here." "Yes," he said, walking closer. "You seem happier today." She blushed slightly. "I guess so. There's this boy outside who dances every day. He's really good and he's funny too. I think he knows I watch him." Richard sat beside her, pretending not to know. "Oh, really? That's nice," Emily nodded. "He's the only one who makes me smile anymore." Her voice softened. "When I see him dance, I feel like maybe the world isn't so bad after all." Richard's heart ached at her words. That small boy on the street, the one society might ignore, the one struggling for food, had done something that all the doctors, nurses, and even he himself couldn't do. He had brought back his daughter's joy. He stayed with her for a while, talking and laughing a little, Emily even asked if they could go downstairs sometime to see the dancer more closely. Richard promised they would. Soon. Later that afternoon, when Emily went for her therapy session, Richard stepped outside the hospital. The air was cool and the city buzzed with life. Across the street he saw Jaden again, dancing on his small patch of pavement. People clapped as they passed, some dropping coins into his can. Richard walked toward him slowly. When Jaden saw him, his face lit up. "Mr. Lawson."
"You came again."
Richard smiled. "I did." "You're quite the performer, Jaden. My daughter saw you from her hospital window today." Jaden froze. "Your daughter?" "Yes," Richard said softly. "She's the girl you've been dancing for all this time." Jaden's eyes widened in shock. "What, that's your daughter? The one who always watches and smiles?" Richard nodded. "Her name is Emily. She's been in a wheelchair since her accident 2 years ago. But you should know something, Jaden. She hasn't smiled like that in a very long time. You brought that smile back." For a moment, Jaden didn't know what to say. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then his eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of something deeper. "I didn't know, sir. I just wanted to make her happy. I thought maybe she was lonely." Richard placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did more than make her happy, son. You gave her hope again." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the street fading into the background. Two people from completely different worlds, and a billionaire and a poor boy, connected by one shared miracle: kindness. "Would you like to meet her?" Richard asked suddenly. Jaden's eyes widened even more. "Meet her, really?" "Yes," Richard said with a smile. "I think she would love that." Jaden nodded eagerly, his heart pounding. "I'd be honored, sir." Together they walked toward the hospital. As they entered, people turned their heads. The sight of a wealthy man walking beside a barefoot street dancer was something you didn't see every day. But Richard didn't care about appearances anymore. Something inside him had changed. When they reached Emily's room, she was resting, her eyes half closed. Richard whispered gently, "Emily, sweetheart, I have someone I'd like you to meet." She turned her head, curious. The moment she saw Jaden, her face lit up completely. You're the boy who dances outside," she said, her voice full of excitement. Jaden smiled shyly. "Yes, ma'am." "That's me." "I didn't know you were Mr. Lawson's daughter." Emily laughed softly. "And I didn't know my dad knew you." The room filled with a warmth that no heater could create. Jaden told her stories about dancing, about how he learned by watching YouTube videos and how he practiced on the streets every day. Emily listened with shining eyes, laughing for the first time in ages. Richard watched silently from the corner, feeling tears slip down his face. In that small hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and white walls, something magical was happening. A connection that went beyond wealth or class, something pure and human. As Jaden left that day, Richard walked him to the door and said, "Jaden, you've done something I could never do. You brought my little girl back to life." The boy smiled and said softly, "Sometimes, sir, happiness doesn't come from what we have. It comes from what we give." And with those simple words, Richard knew his life would never be the same again. The next day, the hospital seemed brighter than usual. Nurses smiled, patients laughed softly, and sunlight poured through the tall windows like golden ribbons. For Emily, it wasn't just another day of checkups and therapy. It was the day she would finally meet her new friend properly. She had barely slept the night before, her mind full of excitement. For months, she had only watched the boy from afar, admiring his energy, his laughter, and his dance. Now she was going to talk to him face to face. Richard arrived early, holding a bouquet of white lilies for Emily and a small box of snacks he had asked his chef to prepare. Not for her, but for Jaden. He didn't know what the boy liked, but he wanted to do something kind in return. When Jaden entered the hospital again, dressed in a freshly washed shirt and clean sneakers that Richard had quietly sent to his home the night before, he looked nervous but happy. He held a little flower in his hand, a small yellow daisy he had picked from a park on his way there. He peeked into Emily's room and she turned toward him instantly. Her eyes lit up, her cheeks pink with joy. "Jaden, you came." He smiled shyly. "Of course I did. I promised Mr. Lawson I'd visit. I brought you something." He held out the daisy awkwardly. Emily took it carefully, smiling. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." Richard watched from the doorway, his heart full. He hadn't seen his daughter so animated in so long. Her voice brighter, her laughter louder, her eyes full of life. For a moment he stepped back and let them talk, not wanting to interrupt something so pure. Jaden pulled up a chair next to her bed, his energy filling the room like sunlight.
So, do you like music?
He asked. I love it, Emily said instantly. I used to dance, you know, before the accident. Her voice softened, but she didn't look sad. For once, it felt like she could talk about it without breaking. Jaden leaned forward, curious. Really, you dance too? That's amazing. She nodded. Yeah, ballet mostly. My mom used to say I looked like a little bird when I danced. Jaden grinned. Then maybe you can teach me some of your moves. I don't know ballet, but I'm a quick learner. Emily laughed, the sound bright and honest. You can't even do ballet in sneakers, silly. Jaden chuckled too. Okay, fine. Then you can teach me with your words and I'll show you my street dance. For the next hour, the room turned into a little world of its own. Jaden played music from his phone, soft beats that echoed through the quiet hospital halls. He stood up and started moving, showing Emily how he used to mix steps, jump, and spin. Emily clapped, cheering him on. Then she tried something brave. She tapped her fingers against her wheelchair's armrest, moving them to the rhythm. Her upper body swayed gently, and her smile widened as she matched his moves in her own way. Jaden stopped dancing and watched her, his eyes soft. You're still a dancer, he said simply. You just dance differently now. Those words hit her heart deeply. No one had said that to her before. Most people treated her like she was broken, like her dreams were gone forever. But Jaden didn't see her as a girl in a wheelchair. He saw her as someone still full of life and rhythm. From that moment, something beautiful began to bloom between them. Every afternoon, Jaden visited her. Sometimes he danced. Sometimes they just talked. They laughed about silly things, shared stories about their lives, and even played music together. Emily tapping along while Jaden created beats on the table with his hands. Richard would often sit quietly nearby, pretending to read but really just watching them. He couldn't believe how much Emily had changed in such a short time. Her laughter filled the halls again. She was eating better, talking more, and even asking her doctors when she could try new therapy exercises. One day, as Jaden packed up to leave, Emily looked at him seriously. Jaden, can I tell you something? Of course, he said. You make me feel brave again, she whispered. When I see you dance, I feel like maybe I can do something great too, even like this. Jaden smiled gently. You will do something great, Emily, you already are. You make me want to dance better every day. She blushed and looked away, smiling. When Jaden left that evening, Richard caught up with him in the hallway. Jaden, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Thank you. You've done something no doctor, no medicine could do. You brought my daughter's spirit back. Jaden shook his head modestly. I didn't do anything special, sir. I just danced. Maybe she just needed someone who believed in her again. Richard nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. But you gave her that belief, he paused. And you gave me something too, a reason to hope again. As Jaden walked home that evening, the sunset painted the sky with orange and purple. He looked up and whispered softly, Thank you, God. Thank you for letting me meet them. And up in her hospital room, Emily held the small daisy he'd given her, smiling to herself. For the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt alive. Neither of them knew it yet, but their friendship was about to lead to something even more powerful, something that would change both their lives forever. A few weeks passed, and the bond between Emily and Jaden grew stronger with every visit. The hospital staff often peeked into her room just to see her smiling again. Her laughter filled the once silent corridors, and even her doctor commented, Whatever's bringing this change, keep it going. Richard knew the reason. It was Jaden. The boy who danced in the streets had somehow given his daughter a reason to hope again. And every time Richard watched the two of them together, he couldn't help but wonder, how could he give something back to this boy who had given them so much? One Friday afternoon, Richard asked Jaden to meet him outside the hospital after his visit with Emily. Jaden arrived, holding his small, worn-out backpack and a half-empty water bottle. You wanted to see me, sir? He asked politely. Yes, Jaden, Richard said, smiling. Walk with me for a bit. They strolled down the sidewalk together, the city alive around them, honking cars, chatting people, the smell of roasted peanuts from a street vendor. But Richard's mind was on something much deeper. After a few moments, he asked, "Jaden, do you ever think about going back to school?" Jaden looked down, hesitating. "I do, sir. Every day, but we can't afford it right now. My mom's medicine costs a lot, and I have to take care of her. Maybe one day when things get better." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about you. You've done something truly incredible, Jaden. You brought my daughter back to life, and I believe someone with your heart and talent deserves a real chance to shine." Jaden looked at him, unsure what he meant. "A chance?" Richard smiled. "Yes. How would you feel if I helped you go back to school and also sent you to a professional dance academy?" Jaden froze. His eyes widened as if he hadn't heard correctly. "What, sir? You mean you'd do that for me?" Richard nodded. "I would. I want you to have every opportunity to learn, to grow, and to share your gift with the world. You've given my daughter happiness, and this is the least I can do in return." For a long moment, Jaden said nothing. His lips trembled as tears filled his eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Nobody's ever done anything like this for me before." Richard placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Then just promise me one thing, that you'll never stop dancing, no matter where life takes you." Jaden nodded, wiping his eyes. "I promise, sir. I'll dance until the world knows your daughter's smile again." That night, Richard made all the arrangements. He called the principal of one of the best schools in the city and personally sponsored Jaden's admission. Then he spoke to a friend who owned a prestigious dance academy. Within days, Jaden was officially enrolled in both. When Richard told Emily the news, she could hardly contain her excitement. "Dad, that's amazing."
Jaden will be so happy,
she said, her voice full of joy. And indeed, when Jaden came to visit the next day, wearing his new school uniform and carrying a small backpack filled with books, Emily's eyes sparkled brighter than ever. "You look so smart," she said proudly. Jaden laughed shyly. "I feel strange wearing all this. I'm used to my old t-shirt and sneakers." "Well, get used to it," Emily teased. "You're going to be a big star now." He smiled, but then said softly, "Emily, you know what's funny? I used to dance on the streets to make people happy. Now, because of your dad, I get to dance for real, to make my dreams come true. It's like my life changed overnight." Emily nodded. "Sometimes good people finally get what they deserve. You earned this, Jaden." That afternoon, Jaden promised her that he'd keep visiting whenever he could. "I'll never stop dancing for you," he said with a grin. "Even if I'm on a big stage one day, I'll still dance like you're watching from your window." And true to his word, he did. Weeks turned into months, and Jaden worked harder than anyone else at the academy. His teachers were amazed at his natural rhythm and emotional depth. He practiced for hours after class, often until his feet ached. But every time he felt tired, he thought of Emily and of her smile, her laughter, and the way she used to clap for him from her hospital bed. At home, his mother cried tears of joy when she learned what Richard had done. "You see, son," she said softly, "God never forgets the good we do. You danced for others, and now life is dancing for you." One evening, Richard and Emily attended one of Jaden's first performances at the academy. The lights dimmed, the music started, and Jaden walked onto the stage with confidence. As he began to move, the entire room fell silent. His body spoke the language of hope, struggle, and gratitude all at once. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. Emily clapped with tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she whispered, "he's not just dancing anymore. He's telling his story." Richard nodded, his own eyes glistening. "And ours too, sweetheart." After the show, Jaden ran up to them, his face glowing with joy. Emily reached out and said, "You were amazing, Jaden." "I'm so proud of you," Jaden smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you both. You gave me the reason to believe." As they stood there, and a billionaire, his daughter, and a once poor boy from the streets, it was clear that something much greater than charity had happened. It was love, kindness, and faith, the kind of connection that changes people forever. And though none of them said it out loud, they all knew one thing. This was only the beginning. It was a bright spring evening. One of those evenings when the air feels light and everything seems possible. The city was alive with sound and color, but inside the grand auditorium downtown there was an even greater energy building. Tonight was Jaden's biggest moment yet, his first major performance in front of a live audience. The hall was packed. Families, friends, and proud students filled every seat, waiting for the show to begin. In the front row sat Richard and Emily, both dressed elegantly. Richard had his arm gently around his daughter's shoulders, while Emily held a bouquet of yellow daisies, Jaden's favorite flower. She was nervous and excited all at once. "Dad," she whispered, "I can't believe how far he's come. I still remember when he used to dance barefoot on the sidewalk." Richard smiled softly. "Yes, and now look at him. He's about to show the whole world what kindness and courage can do." The lights dimmed and the announcer's voice echoed across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our final performer of the night, Jaden Brooks." The spotlight turned on. There he was, standing tall at the center of the stage, dressed in a sleek black costume with golden edges. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with emotion. The music began, slow, haunting, and full of feeling. From the very first step, the audience could tell this wasn't just a dance. It was a story. His story. Jaden moved with grace and power, his feet gliding across the floor like wind. Every motion carried meaning. The struggle of poverty, the pain of loss, the beauty of hope. The lights changed with the rhythm. Blue for sorrow, gold for faith, white for freedom. Then came the part that everyone would remember forever. The music softened to a gentle piano melody. Jaden's movement slowed, and on the large screen behind him appeared a projected image. A photo of Emily, sitting in her wheelchair, smiling. The audience gasped softly. Richard froze, his eyes widening. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, tears already glistening. Jaden looked up toward the image, his face glowing with emotion. He began to dance again, this time slower, more delicate. It was clear to everyone. This part of the performance was for her. For the girl who had once watched him through a hospital window and given him the strength to believe in himself. The piano rose to a beautiful crescendo. Jaden stretched out his arms toward the audience, then knelt on the stage, tears running down his face. It was raw, real, and full of heart. The audience erupted in applause and a standing ovation that shook the hall. But something even more unbelievable happened at that very moment. As Jaden knelt, Emily's body moved slightly forward. Her hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair tightly. She could feel something, a strange, powerful energy rushing through her legs. Her heart raced. "Dad," she whispered, trembling. I can feel my legs." Richard turned to her, stunned. "What did you say?" Tears streamed down her cheeks.
"I can feel them."
"I can feel my legs." Before he could even process it, Emily pressed her feet against the floor, and slowly, shakily, she began to stand. The people around them gasped. A few nurses who had come with them from the hospital ran forward, but Richard held up his hand. "Let her try." Emily's body trembled, her knees weak, but she didn't stop. One small step, then another. The audience, seeing what was happening, fell silent. Even Jaden froze on stage, watching in disbelief as Emily, the girl who had once watched him dance from a hospital window, took her first steps toward him. The music still played softly in the background as she walked down the aisle, each step stronger than the last. The crowd began to cry, to cheer, to shout words of encouragement. Jaden's eyes filled with tears as Emily reached the edge of the stage. He jumped down and ran toward her, meeting her halfway. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him and the entire hall burst into thunderous applause. Richard stood there crying openly, not caring who saw. His daughter, who doctors said might never walk again, was standing on her own 2 feet, and the boy who had once danced for her happiness had somehow become the reason for her miracle. Jaden whispered through his tears, "You did it, Emily, you really did it." Emily smiled, her voice shaking. "No, Jaden, we did it." The lights dimmed again, but the warmth in that hall didn't fade. Reporters rushed to capture the moment. People cried and hugged, and even the judges couldn't stop applauding. For the rest of the night, no one could talk about anything else. The performance, the miracle, the emotion, it felt like something greater than coincidence had just unfolded before their eyes. Later, outside the auditorium as the stars twinkled above, Richard stood with Emily and Jaden. The cool night breeze brushed against their faces. Emily leaned against her father's arm, standing proudly. Richard looked at Jaden and said, "You didn't just change our lives, son. You reminded us that faith can bring light even to the darkest places. Jaden smiled humbly. Maybe we all just needed to believe again, sir. Emily looked up at him, her eyes full of gratitude. You gave me more than hope, Jaden. You gave me my life back. And as the three of them stood together under the glowing city lights, it felt like the whole universe had paused, just to witness a miracle born from kindness, love, and the unshakable belief that good hearts can move mountains. Weeks passed after the night of the performance, but people still couldn't stop talking about it. Newspapers called it the dance that healed. Videos of the moment when Emily stood up went viral around the world. Millions watched in awe, leaving comments about faith, miracles, and the power of kindness. For Jaden, life changed overnight. Dance academies, sponsors, and even TV shows wanted to meet the boy whose dance made a girl walk again. But no matter how many doors opened, Jaden remained the same humble boy who once danced on the streets to make others smile. One morning, he stood on the same street corner where everything had begun, the place where Richard had first seen him dancing for coins under the fading sunlight. The walls were still cracked, the same stray dog slept nearby, and the same street vendor was selling peanuts. But this time, Jaden wasn't dancing out of need. He was dancing out of gratitude. As he moved to the soft rhythm playing from his phone, he smiled. Each step carried memories of struggle, friendship, and faith. Children gathered around him again, clapping, laughing, their eyes wide with wonder. For them, he wasn't just a dancer. He was living proof that dreams could rise from anywhere. Meanwhile, Emily was undergoing therapy at home. But things were different now. She didn't dread her exercises anymore. Every morning she stood with determination, practicing her steps while her father watched proudly from the doorway. Slow and steady, sweetheart, Richard would say. Emily would smile back. I know, Dad. Jaden says it's not about how fast you walk. It's about never giving up. Sometimes Jaden came over after his classes. He would bring flowers or music and they'd laugh for hours. He often told her about his new performances and how he wanted to create a dance school one day, a place where poor children could learn for free. That's a beautiful dream. Emily said one day as they sat in the garden, You'll make it happen, Jaden. You always do. Jaden looked at her and smiled softly. You know, Emily, if I ever build that school, I'll name it after you. Because you're the reason I believed in myself again. She laughed, shaking her head. Then I guess I'll have to learn to dance properly before you make me famous. They both laughed until their sides hurt, but deep inside they knew that promise meant something real. A few months later, Richard organized a charity gala at one of his hotels. The event was to raise funds for children who couldn't afford education or therapy, inspired entirely by Jaden and Emily's journey. People from across the city attended, including business leaders, artists, and doctors. When it was Jaden's turn to speak on stage, the entire room went silent. He looked around nervously at the sea of faces and then smiled. I was once a boy who danced on the street because I didn't have anything else, he began. But one day someone saw me not for what I was, but for what I could be. That moment changed everything. He turned slightly, his eyes meeting Richard and Emily sitting in the front row. Mr. Lawson and Emily taught me something I'll never forget. That kindness can create miracles. And love can heal more than medicine ever could. The audience applauded softly, some wiping away tears. Jaden continued. There are people out there right now who feel lost, broken, or invisible. I want them to know that no dream is too small, and no heart is too poor to do something good. Because sometimes even a simple dance can change a life. When he finished, the crowd rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Richard's eyes filled with pride, and Emily's cheeks were wet with tears. That night, after the gala ended, the three of them stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool and the lights below looked like stars scattered across the ground. Richard placed a hand on both their shoulders. You two remind me of something I'd forgotten long ago, he said softly. Money can build buildings and buy comfort, but it can't buy joy. Real joy comes from giving, from love, from moments like this. Jaden nodded. You gave me a chance, sir. I just tried to make it worth it. Emily looked at both of them, her voice full of warmth. We all gave something, didn't we? You gave him hope, Dad. Jaden gave me courage. And I think I gave you both a reason to believe again. They stood there quietly, letting her words sink in. The night breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace. In that moment, it didn't matter who was rich or poor, who could walk or dance, who had more or less. What mattered was that three lives, once broken in different ways, had found healing together. Months later, Jaden opened his own small dance studio. The sign above the door read, "The Emily Hope Foundation, where every step tells a story." Children from all backgrounds came to learn there, barefoot, smiling, full of life. And every time a new student joined, Jaden would tell them, "Dance from your heart. Because when you dance with love, miracles happen." Emily often visited, helping with the classes. She walked slowly but proudly, her cane tapping softly on the floor. The children adored her, not just because she was the girl from the story, but because she treated them like family. And Richard? He was always there in the background, not as a billionaire this time, but as a father, a friend, and a man who had finally discovered what real wealth meant. It wasn't money. It wasn't fame. It was love, kindness, and the power of one simple act to change the world. And so, the story that began on a dusty street corner ended with light, a light that would never fade, because it had been born from hearts that learned how to truly give.